Welcome to Revenge Threads. I'm really curious. What country are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I used to believe that people showed you who they were with time. That respect once earned would be reciprocated, especially from family. But from the moment I met Cynthia, my now mother-in-law, I learned that some people look at you not as a person, but as a problem to solve. And to her, I was a problem. One she never approved of, never chose, and certainly never wanted her son to marry. The first time we met, she wore this delicate silk scarf like she was straight out of a country club brochure. Her makeup was flawless, her voice smooth, and her smile? It stretched wide, too wide, like a mask. The kind people wear to funerals when they want to seem composed but are barely containing their disgust. "I've heard so much about you," she'd said with a tilt of the head. "Customer service, right? That's such a nice job for someone like you. You must be so patient." I should have known then that every word was dipped in condescension. But I gave her the benefit of the doubt. That was my first mistake. Andrew and I had been together for a year at that point. We had a system that worked for us. He worked in IT and brought in the majority of our income, around 70%. I worked customer service shifts, which admittedly didn't pay as much, but I handled most of the housework. Cooking, laundry, errands, organizing, scheduling. It was my domain, and I took pride in how well we functioned as a team. We were a modern couple. We didn't need traditional to be successful. We just needed balance and love. But to Cynthia, my contribution wasn't just insufficient, it was laughable. In her eyes, I was leeching off her son. She believed that women should serve, sacrifice, and stay silent. The idea that Andrew and I had divided responsibilities based on mutual agreement? Blasphemy. "She works part-time and can't even keep the floors polished," she whispered to Andrew one evening after a family dinner. I had just spent 3 hours in the kitchen preparing the food she barely touched. If she really cared, she'd quit that little job and focus on keeping your home spotless. Andrew defended me, always. He was never cruel. He wasn't a mama's boy. But he was stuck in the tug-of-war between his loyalty to me and the deeply rooted guilt his mother had installed in him over decades. And while he tried to shield me from the worst of it, there were always cracks in the dam. I tried to be the bigger person, bit my tongue, smiled through clenched teeth, told myself you're marrying him, not his mother. But when you're consistently belittled, insulted, and dismissed, even the most patient person starts to feel the rot creep in. By our second Christmas together, she'd stopped pretending. "Oh, another candle," she said, unwrapping the gift I'd bought her. "Well, at least this one doesn't smell as cheap as the last one." I laughed it off, pretended it didn't hurt. But that night I couldn't sleep. Not because of the insult itself, but because Andrew just sat there and let her say it. He didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He just changed the subject. That was the moment I realized this wouldn't stop on its own. Cynthia wasn't going to warm up to me. She wasn't going to change. She wasn't going to suddenly wake up one day and respect me because I'd earned it. She believed I wasn't worthy of her son, and no amount of casseroles, clean floors, or friendly smiles was going to change her mind. Still, I told myself to hang in there. For him. Until New Year's. That night changed everything. We were all sitting in Cynthia's pristine living room. She'd pulled out the crystal glasses and chilled some expensive bottle of champagne, acting like the doting host. The countdown had passed, the fireworks outside had faded, and everyone was settling in with drinks and full bellies. That's when she said it. "Well," Cynthia began, her eyes darting toward Andrew, "I just hope this year you finally find a real wife. You know, one who wants to build a proper home, not play house between retail shifts." There were a few chuckles. Nervous. Awkward. Jake, Andrew's brother, stiffened in his seat. Emily, his wife and my closest ally in that family, froze with her drink mid-air. But no one said a word. Not Andrew. Not anyone. The silence that followed was deafening. And in that stillness I realized something. Cynthia didn't just dislike me. She thought I'd never leave. She believed that I loved Andrew enough to tolerate anything. That I'd swallow every insult, every passive-aggressive jab, every slap to my pride, all for the privilege of being in her son's orbit. She thought she could break me. That night as we drove home, I turned to Andrew and said, "What if I did leave?" He looked at me startled. What do you mean? I mean, I said, voice steady, what if I ended it? What if I gave your mom exactly what she wants? He didn't speak for a long time, but I could see it in his eyes. He was thinking the same thing I was. Not what if, but how. It was one thing to get an apology. It was another to make her earn it. Andrew and I weren't interested in forgiveness without accountability. Not after 2 years of snide remarks, backhanded compliments, and strategic attempts to wedge herself between us like she was the third party in our relationship. Sure, she'd shown up at my job with candy and trembling lips, but guilt doesn't always equal growth. So I let her stew a few more days. No texts. No updates. Just silence. And when she finally called again, this time sobbing into the phone saying she missed us, missed me, missed her boys, smiling, I agreed to meet. But on one condition: Andrew would join. And we'd have the conversation at our place, not hers. I didn't want her in control of the setting, not even the furniture. She arrived 15 minutes early. Typical. Sat on our couch like it was a church pew, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting to be judged. Maybe she was. Andrew stayed quiet at first, letting me speak. He sat next to me, arm around the back of the couch, but his posture screamed cold detachment. I could tell she noticed. She always noticed when he wasn't beaming like her perfect little boy. Before we talk, I began, I want you to know something. She nodded quickly. Of course. I'm not here to make peace. Not yet. I'm here to clarify where we stand. Her smile faltered. I stayed silent for a long time, I continued. I let your comments slide. I swallowed a lot of disrespect because I love Andrew, but I won't do it again. You don't get to insult me, manipulate him, and then drop off chocolate like it wipes the slate clean. I understand, she said quietly. I don't think you do, Andrew cut in, his voice harder than she'd ever heard it before. Because if you did, you wouldn't have said half the things you said. You called her job play money. You said she was lazy because she doesn't iron your definition of gender roles into our relationship. You treated her like a phase. Cynthia flinched. I was scared to stand up to you, he admitted, but watching her walk away made me realize what I was risking. And I won't let you make me choose again. She blinked fast, eyes brimming. I don't want you to choose, she whispered. I got used to being needed. When you were little, I was everything. And when you grew up, I thought if I didn't stay involved, I'd be forgotten. You thought undermining my partner would keep you close, Andrew said. But all it did was push me away. There was a long silence. I watched her shrink into herself. For a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. I can change, she said. I will change. Just, please give me the chance. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stood and went into the kitchen. Pulled out a list I'd written the night before. When I returned, I placed it on the table in front of her. What's this? She asked. Our terms. Her brows knit together. Boundaries, I said. Non-negotiables. You want a relationship with us? You follow these. He picked it up, eyes scanning. No uninvited visits. No comments about our finances, jobs, or division of chores. No passive-aggressive digs at family events. No undermining our decisions, especially if kids ever come into the picture. Any future insults? You're out. And if I slip? She asked, voice trembling. Then you're out, I repeated. For real this time. Not a performance. Not a lesson. Just gone. She looked up at me. That's fair. I nodded. And just like that, the power shifted. She was no longer the puppet master behind the family strings. We weren't the polite audience. We were the directors now. And if she wanted a role in our lives, she had to follow our script. Later that night, when the door finally closed behind her, Andrew turned to me and said, I've never seen her look that small. She needed to, I said. For once. He smiled. I'm proud of you. I grinned. I'm proud of us. We clinked wine glasses, and as I leaned into his side, I realized something that made all the manipulation, all the scheming, all the rehearsed heartbreak worth it. He thought she was playing chess. Turns out we were playing poker. And we were holding all the cards. 2 weeks passed. During that time, Cynthia did what most people do when they realize they've lost control. She performed. She was suddenly all smiles. Texted only to say hi or share pictures of old family vacations. She sent Andrew a book about setting healthy boundaries. I rolled my eyes. And she sent me a handwritten card calling me the daughter she never had. Sweet, right? Except when we saw her the following weekend for Andrew's dad's birthday dinner, she was wearing a smug little grin that said one thing: "I'm back in your good graces now. I win." Only she didn't. Because I saw the way she scanned my shoes like she was calculating their cost. I caught the comment she made to Andrew about how we used to eat healthier before someone started buying frozen dinners. I even noticed how she jokingly called me Miss Bossy when I reminded her not to give Andrew wine. He was driving. Microaggressions. Tiny jabs dressed as quirks. But a blade is still a blade no matter how dull. That night, Andrew and I sat in the car in silence before I said it. She hasn't changed. I know. So, what do we do? I asked, already knowing the answer. He glanced over. We escalate. Step 1. Let her believe she'd won. We played the game. We smiled when she brought over brownies. We laughed politely when she made a joke about how Andrew had gotten so thin since some people stopped making real meals. We let her feel safe, secure, smug, all while planning our next move. Step 2. Give her a taste of real loss. We told Cynthia we were considering moving. Farther out, more space, better schools someday. She panicked. Asked if it was because of her, guilt reeking from her tone. We reassured her that of course not. It was just about our future. She offered to help with down payments, connections, even her retired realtor friend. We smiled and said, "We'll think about it." Step 3. Let her walk into her own trap. One night, over dinner at her place, yes, we endured it, Andrew mentioned casually, "You know, with everything going on, I think it's finally time we have the conversation." Cynthia blinked. What conversation? You know, about the future. Marriage. Kids. Her face paled. Andrew continued, "We're planning something for next month. It's small, just courthouse vows and a backyard dinner. We'll send you an invite, of course." I watched her eyes flicker with calculation. She was piecing together the timeline, the fact that she wouldn't be involved, the quiet betrayal that came from not being the one in control. She smiled. Of course. That's lovely. But it wasn't. Not to her. A few days later, we got a voicemail. I think it's unfair to exclude family from something so important. After everything we've been through. After I apologized. There was the guilt, the manipulation, the old Cynthia rising from beneath the ashes of her fake redemption. But this time we didn't ignore it. I picked up the phone and called her back. Calmly, firmly. "You don't get to dictate what we do," I said. "You lost that right when you spent years belittling me and trying to drive a wedge between us. You got your second chance. You used it to polish your mask, not change your behavior." He sputtered, tried to argue, but I didn't let her. "Here's the truth, Cynthia. You didn't want to lose me because you loved me. You wanted to win. You don't get to win here. We do. And we've decided not to invite toxicity to our wedding, even if it's dressed in pearls and crocodile tears." We got married quietly. Backyard dinner. Lights strung through trees. Laughter echoing off wine glasses. No chaos. No manipulation. No Cynthia. Later that night, Andrew handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a necklace with a pendant shaped like a dagger. "For every time she tried to stab you with her words," he said, "and you handed her back a sword of your own." I kissed him. And I wore that necklace proudly. Because revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's walking away without ever looking back. Sometimes it's choosing peace over performance. And for once, peace felt like power. Our wedding day arrived like the quiet hush before a sunrise. Soft, sure, and without drama. The courthouse ceremony took 10 minutes. I wore a short ivory dress with satin sleeves, And Andrew looked like everything I'd ever wanted in navy blue. Our families, the ones who deserved to be there, clapped and cried and laughed as we exchanged vows and a kiss that felt like a revolution. There were no thrown bouquets, no dramatic speeches, no choreographed dances. Just us, and the absence of Cynthia. But of course, the absence wouldn't last. Started with a Facebook post. An old coworker of Andrew's messaged me a screenshot. Cynthia had made a public post with a blurry picture of an old family dinner and the caption, "When your son makes the biggest mistake of his life and marries someone who doesn't understand the value of family, but you still smile for the sake of love. Broken heart." I laughed. Genuinely. It was such a sad, desperate little attempt to gain sympathy. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. "Stay strong, Mama Red Heart. She'll come around eventually. Some women just don't get how lucky they are." One woman, whom I assume Cynthia had not briefed well enough, wrote, "Wait, didn't you say she was the daughter you never had?" Silence. But Cynthia wasn't done. 2 days into our honeymoon in the Catskills, we woke to a knock on our cabin's front door. Andrew opened it wearing a robe and a smirk already suspicious. I heard his voice drop. "Are you serious right now?" I came up beside him. There she stood. Cynthia, in a beige coat, red lipstick slightly smeared, and a travel mug in her hand like she was just stopping by on a Sunday afternoon. "I thought maybe we could talk," she said brightly. "Just clear the air." Andrew stepped fully out the door and closed it behind him, leaving me inside. But I could hear everything. "Mom, this is our honeymoon," he said flatly. She tooted. "I know, sweetheart, but I figured if I just waited, you'd never invite me to fix things. And I want to fix things. Don't you?" There was a long pause. Then he replied, "I don't want to fix anything. I want you to leave." "But I brought you coffee." "You brought control." When he came back inside, he looked tired. Not surprised, just tired. "I think she really believes this is a movie," he muttered. "Like if she just makes a big enough scene, she'll win in the end." I leaned against him. We already rolled the credits. That night, I made a post of my own. A photo of me and Andrew wrapped in blankets, a fire crackling behind us. My hand rested on his chest, his lips on my forehead. The caption: "Turns out love doesn't require drama. Just honesty, patience, and the courage to walk away from people who mistake manipulation for affection." He saw it. I know, because she unfriended me an hour later, then blocked me. I laughed again, then closed the app. The real revenge? It wasn't yelling. It wasn't public humiliation. It wasn't even Andrew moving out and forcing her to iron his socks for a week. It was showing her that we would live joyfully without her permission, without her approval, without her. He thought she was the queen of our story, but we burned the throne and built a home instead. About 2 weeks after our return from the honeymoon, things had gone unusually quiet. Too quiet. No cryptic Facebook posts. No accidental run-ins at Andrew's workplace. No calls from his extended family trying to play peacemaker. Cynthia had gone radio silent, and if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that silence from Cynthia didn't mean peace. It meant plotting. And she didn't disappoint. It happened on a Sunday morning. Andrew's phone rang while he was brushing his teeth. I glanced down at the screen and saw the name I hadn't seen in weeks: Mom. I didn't pick up. Neither did he. But then I checked my own phone. 12 missed calls. 7 voicemails. 1 group text to Andrew's extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, where she'd finally played her last pitiful card. "I'm devastated to announce that my son has cut me out of his life. Because of her. She's manipulated him into believing I'm a monster. All I ever wanted was to protect him, but clearly that's no longer welcome." Attached, a photo of a burned-out candle, some wilted roses, and a dramatic black and white selfie of Cynthia looking off into the distance like a mourning widow. The responses were instant. "I thought you were the one who told her to get lost at New Year's? Wait, didn't you call her a gold digger in front of Grandma? This is again? Didn't you post about this last month? You literally begged her to take Andrew back. And now you're the victim. And then, sweet poetic justice, came the message from Aunt Nora. Cynthia, I say this with love. You made your bed. Now lie in it. We're tired. That one got 73 likes and 3 heart emojis. I nearly framed it. Andrew finally called his father later that evening to give him the update. His dad was calm, almost amused. I warned her, he said. Told her if she didn't back off, the family would turn on her. Now she's got no one to vent to except the dog. Andrew snorted. Lucky dog. Tell your wife, his dad added, that we're proud of her. She held her ground. When Andrew relayed that to me, I didn't say anything at first. Just took a deep breath and let it sink in. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. A few days later, a small white envelope showed up in our mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single card, blank on the front. Inside, scrawled in tight, curling handwriting. I was wrong. That was it. No name, no signature, but we both knew. We put it in a drawer and never spoke of it again. Because real revenge isn't shouting or slamming doors. It's letting someone spiral in their own silence. It's choosing peace over power. It's living a joyful, ordinary life with the person you love, and leaving the people who tried to ruin that love behind. Cynthia burned the bridge. We built a home on the other side. It had been a quiet few weeks. Peaceful even. Andrew and I had settled into a rhythm. Our Sunday mornings were spent making pancakes and reading side by side. He had finally stopped checking his phone every 10 minutes for a surprise text from his mother. And I'd stopped flinching every time the doorbell rang. We were moving on. But the thing about peace is that it never lasts long, especially when you're related to Cynthia. It was a Thursday when I got the email. The subject line was strange. Hi. You don't know me, but I know her. Attached was a single document and a brief message. You don't owe me anything, but I thought you deserved the truth. I was once where you are now. If this helps you understand her, then it was worth sending. Melinda R. At first I was hesitant to open it, but curiosity won. What I found inside was a scanned letter. Yellowed, smudged, and dated almost 20 years ago. It was a restraining order. Filed by a woman named Melinda Roberts. Against Cynthia. I stared at the page, my heart pounding in disbelief. The woman who sent this. She was Andrew's dad's ex-girlfriend. The one before Cynthia. The one no one ever talked about. And suddenly, all of Cynthia's obsessive behavior made a sick kind of sense. The letter explained it all. Melinda had dated Andrew's father after his divorce. According to her, Cynthia showed up at her workplace several times. Harassed her. Followed her to the grocery store. Threatened to ruin her chances with Andrew's dad. Left voicemails telling her she'd never be good enough. Eventually, Melinda had to file the order and move out of town. She always wanted control, the letter concluded, and if she couldn't get it through love, she'd take it through fear. I printed it out and left it on the kitchen table. When Andrew came home from work, he read it in silence. I watched his face shift, confusion, anger, then sadness. She chased her off, he said softly. I nodded. She did to her what she tried to do to me. He sat down, rubbing his temples. I always thought something was off, but my dad never really told me why they broke up. Just said it didn't work out. Now I get it. We debated what to do with the information. Should we tell his dad? Confront Cynthia? But then I remembered something important. We didn't owe her anything anymore. That letter wasn't about revenge. It was validation. Proof that it had never been about me. Cynthia had always been like this. Still, it changed something in Andrew. Over the next week, I saw a quiet transformation in him. He became more protective of his time. Stopped entertaining phone calls that drained him. And for the first time since we met, he said the words I never expected to hear. I think I need therapy. I kissed his forehead. That's the bravest thing you've ever said. He smiled. Besides proposing to you? I smirked. Close second. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the gentle act of choosing healing over chaos. Of ending a cycle before it continues. Of saying, This ends with me. Melinda never got closure. But she gave us ours. Came on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of sunny golden day you think is immune to drama. Andrew was mowing the lawn, sweat glistening on his brow, earbuds in. I was curled on the couch with a book, a scented candle flickering beside me. Peaceful. Ordinary. Until the knock. 3 sharp raps. I opened the door and froze. Cynthia. Holding a Tupperware container. Wearing pearls. Smiling like she hadn't tried to sabotage our relationship 36 different ways. "Hi, sweetheart," she said sweetly. "I made lemon bars." I blinked. "You're not supposed to be here." He pushed past me. That's how Cynthia operated. With assumption. Entitlement. Like the world belonged to her by default. "I figured enough time has passed," she chirped, settling herself on my couch like it was still hers. "And I had such a wonderful idea. A dinner. Just the 3 of us. I want to show you both I'm serious about changing." Andrew stepped in through the back sliding door. His face dropped when he saw her. But instead of anger, there was calm. He took out his earbuds. "Mom, we've talked about this." She stood and walked toward him. "I know. But darling, please just hear me out. I was going through a phase. I've had time to reflect. I've changed." "Have you?" I asked from behind. Her smile tightened. "Of course. Because that woman you drove out of town with threats 20 years ago? Melinda? She doesn't seem to think so." Cynthia's face drained of color. I pulled out the copy of the restraining order and placed it gently on the coffee table. Her eyes darted down, then back up, and for the first time since I met her, she looked scared. That wasn't what it looked like. Andrew crossed his arms. "You've been like this my whole life." She looked at him, panicked. "I just wanted what's best for you." "No," I said. "You wanted control. And when you couldn't manipulate me into leaving, you tried to sabotage our future together." I was protecting him. Andrew laughed bitterly. "From what? A woman who cooks, works full-time, and doesn't fold your son's laundry on command." Cynthia's hands trembled. "Please don't do this. Don't throw me out. You'll regret it." "I already do," Andrew said. He opened the door. She stood there for a second, just long enough to realize she had no more cards left to play. Then she walked out. And this time I locked the door behind her. It wasn't the dramatic showdown we expected. But it was closure. Real, unfiltered, non-candy-coated closure. And the best part? 2 hours later, as we lay in bed, still coming down from the emotional high, Andrew turned to me and said, "You saved me from her." I smiled. "No," I whispered. "You saved yourself." At first, we thought Cynthia had taken the loss gracefully. A clean break. No more visits. No more surprise baked goods. No more judgmental side eyes across the dinner table or unsolicited advice about how I should be folding socks like her grandmother used to. But the silence was too clean. Too neat. It was the kind of quiet that warned of something bubbling under the surface, like the eye of a hurricane, deceptively calm before chaos resumes. And sure enough, it didn't take long. First, it was the extended family. Andrew's cousin Melissa texted me, "Hey, just heard you and Andrew are reconsidering marriage? Hope everything's okay." Reconsidering? We were literally picking wedding colors. Then Andrew's great-aunt left a voicemail on his phone, tearfully urging him to forgive his mother before it was too late. By the third message, this time from an old neighbor, claiming to have heard that I had forced Cynthia out and was trying to separate Andrew from his roots, we knew. She was whispering. Not screaming. Not fighting. Just planting carefully curated seeds in the soil of people's assumptions. Painting herself as the doting, heartbroken mother. Me. I was the cold, ungrateful interloper. And Andrew? The poor, manipulated son. First we laughed. We had truth on our side after all. But rumors don't need truth. They just need fuel. And Cynthia had always been an expert arsonist. The tipping point came during Andrew's company holiday party. We were sipping drinks, casually chatting with his manager and a few co-workers, when someone asked how we were holding up after the falling out. That term, falling out. So soft, so harmless. Like Cynthia had simply tripped over her own feelings and landed somewhere outside our lives. Andrew froze. Right there, glass halfway to his lips. Then he lowered it, turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "She wants a war," in whispers. "Let's give her the truth out loud." The next day we recorded a video. A simple one. No theatrics. No name calling. Just Andrew and me sitting on the couch explaining how the past year had been. How boundaries were crossed. How manipulation was met with compassion and how that compassion was weaponized. We ended the video with this. We love our family, but love doesn't mean silence. And healing doesn't happen in lies. We posted it privately and sent it, one by one, to every single person who had reached out with questions or comments or assumptions. The reaction was electric. Some apologized. Some were embarrassed. One person forwarded it back to Cynthia, who, as expected, went nuclear. She called Andrew, screamed, accused him of publicly humiliating her, threatened to disown him, said we were ungrateful, heartless. And finally, when none of it worked, when she realized the shame no longer had power, she hung up. And this time, it stayed silent. Truly silent. For the first time, it felt like peace. Not the peace of walking on eggshells, but the peace of walking barefoot unapologetically in your own home. Andrew curled next to me that night, hand resting on mine. "We didn't break up," he whispered, "but we broke free." I smiled. And for the first time in a long time, I slept without a single bad dream. The morning of our wedding felt like a fairy tale. Sunlight pooled across the hardwood floors of the bridal suite like golden silk, and my girls were already buzzing around with makeup brushes and coffee cups. There was music, laughter, a touch of nerves, but the good kind, the kind that comes when you know something real and beautiful is about to begin. I stood in front of the mirror, letting the moment sink in. This was our day. After everything. After Cynthia. We had earned this. I didn't know then that she had already arrived. Not in disguise. Not quietly. No, Cynthia came in wearing a pastel blue dress, as if trying to look like an innocent grandmother plucked from a Hallmark movie, and walked in through the back, whispering something to a catering staff member. I wouldn't find out until later what she tried to do. Here's what happened. Our ceremony was held at a small vineyard just outside the city. We had a beautiful, intimate guest list. Security wasn't tight, because who crashes a wedding after sending passive-aggressive prayer emojis for months? Cynthia, apparently. She hadn't RSVP'd. She hadn't responded to any messages. Not one peep since the video. But just before the ceremony, as Andrew stood with the officiant, one of our photographers spotted her speaking to the venue coordinator. She told them she was Andrew's mother and needed to bless the altar. Let me be clear, there is no altar at a vineyard ceremony. Just a big arch of flowers and a few lanterns. But she was fishing. Looking for something, anything, that would let her claim a piece of the moment. The staff, trained for hiccups, politely told her no. She tried to insist, asked to at least be allowed to present Andrew with something before the vows. She had brought a gift. Not for me. For him. A gold chain. Heavy, flashy, with a tiny pendant that read Mama's Boy. Oh, I'm not joking. The venue coordinator, God bless her, told her the ceremony was starting and escorted her, firmly, to the back of the guest area. She wasn't on the seating chart. She sat anyway. I didn't see her until I was halfway down the aisle. My father was holding my arm. Everyone was standing. The music was playing. Andrew was waiting, eyes glassy, smile soft. And then my gaze flicked left. There she was. Sitting in the third row. Wearing her pastels. Clutching that little box with the necklace inside. We locked eyes. She didn't blink. Didn't smile. Just sat there with the defiance of someone who thought love was a game, and she had lost unfairly. But I didn't flinch. I smiled bigger. Because she was exactly where I wanted her to be. A silent witness to the fact that we didn't just survive her. We outgrew her. The ceremony went perfectly. Andrew's vows made me cry. I made him laugh. When we kissed, the guests erupted in applause. And Cynthia? She sat, clapped twice, then disappeared before the reception. I know because I asked the photographer to check. No gift left behind. No note. Nothing. And that was her final move. Not a bang. Not a scream. Just a quiet exit from a story she no longer controlled. We danced our first dance under fairy lights. We toasted champagne. We laughed until our ribs hurt. And that night, as we lay tangled in each other, Andrew whispered, "She didn't ruin it." "No," I said. "She just reminded us why it matters." Because love isn't control. It isn't guilt. It isn't manipulation dressed up in tradition. It's partnership. It's laughter in chaos. It's a man who helps steam your dress because your hands are shaking, and a woman who fakes a breakup just to expose a lie. And it's finally having the strength to say, "No more. Not here. Not today. Not ever again."